So this is a review of Amazing Spider-Man 692 to 694, which basically covers the three-part Alpha storyline that concluded like 2 or 3 months ago. Now, I've never been really a fan of Dan Slott's Spider-Man. I mean, when I came on into comic books when Spider Island was going on, and I still say that's the only good story arc he's done on the book. Everything's since, like No Turning Back, Ends of the Earth, that's all just been really, really bad. Now, when I read this arc at first, I thought it was okay. It wasn't anything like amazing or anything, but I thought it was one of his better arcs that he's done since Spider Island. Then when I think about this book, it is so full of shit, and it completely destroys the very character of Spider-Man, and it further reinforces why One More Day should have been retconned out of Marvel continuity following Marvel Now. It just... Wow, I gotta give you a short synopsis of the story before I can really rant about the book itself. So basically, in this three-part storyline, this kid called Andrew Maguire, he goes on this class. He's basically like this nobody. He's kind of like Peter Parker. He gets ignored by everybody, but he's nothing special. He's just one of those people that's there. He's not particularly smart, funny, handsome, athletic, or anything. He's just sort of there. His parents don't give a shit about him. His life sucks. And then during a field trip to Horizon Labs, where Peter Parker, shows this new project he's working on, the project goes horribly wrong, and the energy from Peter Parker's science experiment shoots this Andrew kid in the chest, and he basically gets superpowers like super speed, the ability to fly, and super strength, and he becomes Alpha. And basically, what this kid is, what the story tries to make you think is this is basically who Peter Parker would become if Uncle Ben hadn't died. Like, he's irresponsible, he's just a paparazzi hog, he does a bunch of commercials, he doesn't care about anyone but himself. He's basically if a pop star or a rock star from the 80s or 90s got superpowers and he's just completely irresponsible with them. He doesn't give a shit. No one's really giving a shit about him. So yeah, he's abusing his power even though he should kind of be humble with it. Now, as I said, I thought the story arc was okay at first. But there are a few lines that completely destroy the point of this story arc, and it just ruins the whole thing. First of all, Peter Parker discovers these Parker particles, which, oh my god. Alright, it sounds stupid. He basically discovers these particles that tap into the very power source of the universe. I don't know how the fuck he did this, but it's a comic book, so yeah, I'm gonna forget it on that one. Basically, he discovers these particles that he calls Parker particles, and they basically tap into the very power of the universe. This kid, Andrew Maguire, he gets shot with these Parker particles, and then he gets superpowers. Now, everyone in the book tries to tell him, except Mary Jane, of course, who's the only non-retarded person in this book. Everyone tells him that he's your responsibility, he's your fault, you gotta take care of him, and blah 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 blah. Before he even becomes a real superhero, before he can really get off, Reed Richards says, I knew about these particles years and years and years ago. Okay, if you knew about these particles, and you work at Horizon Labs, and you know everything that Peter Parker does, why in the fuck would you let him continue with his experiment? You know that these things make him really, really powerful, and they are very dangerous, and you work in this lab, so why in the fuck would you let him continue an experiment like that? Why? And then throughout the whole book, he's like, Alpha's your responsibility, it's your fault, blah, 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 blah. And, no, Reed Richards, he's your responsibility because you obviously didn't give a shit enough to actually tell Spider-Man to stop, and now that the whole experiment went wrong, you're basically blaming Peter Parker for something you should have done. It just makes Reed Richards look like a complete and utter asshole, and I've never seen the guy like that. And then this book constantly tries to convince you that Peter Parker is this horrible, horrible person. If Uncle Ben hadn't died, he would become Alpha or something. First of all, I hate this aspect of the character, along with everything's my responsibility, everything's my fault. I hate these aspects of the character, and I think Dan Slott really exacerbates the issue. Basically, what I hate here is the fact that he constantly says, have you ever met a more self-centered person besides me? Now, if One More Day never happened, I would say no, because Peter Parker, he was raised by Aunt May and Uncle Ben, two of the nicest people in the world, and even though I think, and he has a conscience, this alpha kid, he has no conscience, he just relishes in his power, but he's a nobody. Even if Peter Parker didn't get his superpowers, he still would have, I think, eventually gotten Gwen Stacy, and I think he still would have become a great scientist and something. Alpha would have gotten nowhere with his life. So yeah, and Peter Parker has been raised by good people, and I really don't buy that they constantly keep telling you, I'm a self-centered person. If Uncle Ben hadn't died, I would have become like this. I would basically become a supervillain or something. And no, you wouldn't. I absolutely hate this about the character. He is a nice guy in general, and I think even though he would have fucked around with his powers as Spider-Man at first, I think his conscience and his good upbringing would have allowed him to see, look, people are dying, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I should start taking my job seriously. And the fact that they constantly try to convince you that he's a self-centered person doesn't work. Now, before I went on this little rant of mine, I said, before Brand New Day or One More Day or whatever the fuck you want to call it. After One More Day, I actually do believe that he is the most self-centered person on the planet because he made a deal with the devil to get rid of a marriage with his hot wife who's Mary Jane. Yes, you are going to make a deal with the devil to get rid of a marriage with your hot wife who's Mary Jane Watson, one of the hottest chicks in comic books, so you can save your old shitty aunt who's okay with dying. So I don't know. In my personal opinion, I've always seen Spider-Man as someone who would fuck around with his powers at first, but he would realize this is wrong, I should get better. Post One More Day, I don't know. I really don't know. And then something else happens. There's this guy, like this character that shows up in issue 2. I don't know what his name is, but I'm going to go check him out and, talk about him. Basically, he's like this paparazzi guy. Frankie Collins. He's basically like this paparazzi, and he just goes off on Spider-Man and tells him, you painted this giant target on this kid's back. This is all your fault. Alright, I will admit, Peter telling him that he has the potential to become the most powerful force in the universe is really, really stupid. And I just think that the concept that this kid is more powerful than Thanos or the Phoenix or Apocalypse, I mean, that's just bullshit. There is no way that this kid is more powerful than the Phoenix, which is like the top tier thing in terms of the Marvel Universe as far as I'm concerned. But alright, let's buy for a second that this kid really could become the most powerful force in the universe. Spider-Man telling him that is really stupid. However, Spider-Man did not paint a giant target on this kid's back. Basically, this giant blob monster thing shows up in the middle of New York and it battles the Fantastic Four. It completely wrecks the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, and this kid basically lights up the whole city like a fucking Christmas tree and yells out, "It's clobbering time!" and he just destroys that monster. And this is basically how the Jackal finds out about this kid. And this kid is doing commercials all the goddamn time. He is constantly on television, he's constantly in the newspaper. So no, Spider-Man did not paint a giant target on this kid's back. He painted a giant target on himself. So stop blaming Spider-Man for everything. And this is really an issue with Dan Slott's whole run. Spider-Man cannot be responsible for anyone. And this is a problem with almost every Dan Slott series, especially Ends of the Earth, where Doc Ock uses Horizon Lab technology invented by Peter Parker to create this machine to fuck up the ozone layer. Alright. If you invented a machine that does screw up the ozone layer, then you're asking for trouble because it's going to be stolen, especially in the Marvel Universe. However, that thing is just a small piece of it just uses a small piece of your tech, it was modified. You didn't know it could be used as such. So stop blaming yourself for something that you didn't create. If he was like Tony Stark and he genuinely made weapons, then yeah, you're asking for it. All those people, you basically gave bad people, or basically people in general, the tools to kill each other. If he was like Tony Stark, I would say, yeah, that's on your head. You gave them the tools to kill each other. That is at least partially your fault. But it's not. And just, I'm so sick and tired of this whole thing with Spider-Man. He's not responsible for anything, and he is generally a good person, and I believe that if Uncle Ben hadn't died, he still would have become a good Spider-Man. So yeah, this is absolutely horrible. It's not the worst thing he's done. I mean, from a scale of 1 to 10, I would give this story like a 5 out of 10, or 4 or 5 out of 10. I still don't know how I feel about it, but it's mediocre. It just makes Spider-Man and Reed Richards and everyone look like a complete idiot. It constantly forces the idea that Spider-Man is a self-centered asshole, that everything is his fault, that everything is his responsibility, and that he would have become a bad guy if Uncle Ben hadn't died. And I really hate those things about the character, and I hate that Dan Slott constantly forces it down my goddamn throat. So yeah, it's 5 out of 10. It's mediocre. He does have a few funny lines here and there, like when Ben Grimm's like, I trademarked clobbering time. You don't see me saying thing smash or rock on or something. I thought that was funny. He writes an okay Ben Grimm. He writes a fantastic Mary Jane, who's the only non-retarded person in this book. And so yeah, it's a 5 out of 10. If you are bored shitless, this is a good time waster. It's only 3 issues long. If you really want to waste a couple of minutes of your life, if you're bored, read this. If you do not want to read Dan Slott's Spider-Man, then read Spider Island, and all of his other work is non-canon as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Alpha arc from Amazing Spider-Man, and I'm out.